It was a cold autumn night in 1863, and the war had been raging for more than 2 years. In a small town in the north, a group of soldiers had just returned home from the battlefield. But these were not ordinary soldiers, they were dead soldiers who had fallen in battle. The townspeople buried them in a mass grave, but now, for some inexplicable reason, they were walking again. At first, the townspeople were overjoyed to see their loved ones alive again. But they soon realized that something was wrong. The soldiers were no longer the same as they were before they died. They were quiet and withdrawn, and their eyes seemed to be looking into the distance, as if they were looking at something that no one else could see. A city doctor who took care of wounded soldiers during the war was called for an examination. He was horrified by what he found. The soldiers' bodies were cold and lifeless, and yet somehow they were still walking and talking. He tried to explain it as some kind of medical miracle, but deep down he knew that there was something more sinister behind it. As the days passed, the townspeople began to fear the soldiers. They strolled through the city at night, their shoes clattering on the cobblestones, and their faces distorted into grotesque expressions. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts when they saw them coming, and even the bravest men in the city shuddered at the sight of them. One night a group of soldiers appeared at the door of a young widow. She lost her husband in the war, and when she saw him standing on her doorstep, she fell to her knees in tears. But her husband was not the man she knew and loved. His skin was cold and gray, and his eyes were empty and lifeless. She tried to touch him, but he recoiled from her, as if her touch burned him. As the days turned into weeks, the soldiers began to change. Their bodies began to decompose, and their once human features distorted, turning into something more monstrous. The townspeople, now truly terrified, have banded together to try to get rid of the undead soldiers. They dug a mass grave and burned the bodies, hoping to put an end to the nightmare that engulfed their city. But it was too late. The soldiers have already done their damage. Their presence changed the city forever, and the memory of their cold, lifeless bodies walking the streets haunted the townspeople for many years. The story of the fallen soldiers who returned home during the Civil War has become a legend in the city. Some believed it was God's punishment for the horrors of war, while others thought it was the work of a malicious force. Whatever the reason, it was a reminder that the dead should be left to rest in peace, and that sometimes even death cannot prevent us from returning to those we love.